Hello friends, it's Marley here again, and here we are on Christmas Eve, whatever that means to everybody out there, and I've spent a beautiful morning down the beach with my family, appreciating the gifts at this time of year, even though it's been a big year, and quite a challenging end to the year, to be honest, and I imagine that's probably true for many of us, and I'm hoping that a lot of us out there are getting some time to finally soften and relax and spend time with people we love in places we love. That said, as a parent of only a little guy, we're not there yet, but I do know the great pressures of the mums and dads out there. So big ups to the mums and dads for all the love and support they're giving their little ones. If you're a little one out there, big thanks to your parents. And this is a story that I also wrote probably like 6 years ago, and it's called The Bunyip Who Stole, it was The Bunyip Who Stole Solstice, but we're going to do The Bunyip Who Stole Christmas, because, you know, they work, it both works. So, would you like to come on a story adventure? Turn your ears this way. In the time of our great ancestors, when the animals could talk, on this land that we all live on, a bunyip there did walk. And the bunyip's name was Bunya, a mighty cranky chappie. He hated anything in life that made the others happy. So at Christmas time of year, when the bright sun came around, old Bunya would do anything to bring the others down. And so it was. One Christmas Eve, the morning before Christmas, he was sitting in his billabong, and he was bubbling and he was boiling. Partly because it was so stinking hot. And his poor little billabong was down to about like this. You can imagine him there, beak like a platypus, cranky eyes, feathered cloak. And he could swear with his supersonic hearing that in the distance he heard the sound of the other animals, particularly the other animals' kids, all the way down the creek, down the river, at the river mouth at the ocean, where they always gather at this time of year, to play, to celebrate, and to await, Christmas morning. He could imagine it. And so he started to look around, sniffing the air and thinking. And then, a devious plan came into his head. We'll leave him there. Down on the beach, little koala, little kookaburra, little kangaroo, little goanna, little magpie, little possum, little wombat, the little dolphins in the shore breaks, they were all hanging out. They were all playing, they were kicking the footy around and playing tips, ultimate tips, toilet flush, if you know that game. They were jumping in and out of the water. They were just having a great time. Yeah? The parents were off. They were still very busy. They were still very busy in the bush, trying to get things sorted for the next day, you know? Because everyone knew that Santa Claus, that great sun spirit who rides in his bush sled, would be coming around that night. And Santa Claus was a person, a spirit of great generosity. Giver of gifts, giver of gifts. And this year, all the kids were a little bit hyper aware, a bit hyper excited about Santa Claus. And they started to talk about what they might get. They started to argue about who was going to get the best present. Maybe little koala was arguing about having a little hatch animal, a little creature to look after. That's going to be the best thing. I'm going to look after my little hatch animal. Hatch animal. I think that's what they're called. Maybe it was the Tamagotchi. I don't know. Something like that. Bah, said Kangaroo. I'm going to get a brand new e-scooter. I said, are you old enough? I'm definitely getting one, and it's way better than some little animal you got to look after. And Dolphin was like, whatever guys, I'm going to get myself a new surfboard. The Kitten was like, no, well, I'm going to get a football so that people kick that instead of kicking me. And they all laughed. The Kitten was a bit of a joker. But like this, they started to argue more and more, until eventually they started to get a bit serious about who's the better one, who's going to get the best gift. You're not going to get anything because you've been naughty, 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 and I've been so nice. I've been so nice. Can you imagine? Well, like this they went on. Meanwhile, up in the bush, that Bunyip was walking around and he came across a tree with sort of spiky hair that went down like this and a little shoot in the middle with a seed pod at the top, and he thought, ha ha, talk to that tree, it's a grass tree. He said, yes, okay. Bit of a sorcerer, that Bunyip. He was coming up with new magic and he snapped one of these off that tree. Perfect, he said. And then he went around in the bush and he was looking here and there and said, ah, there it is. It's a hibiscus tree, an old one, a dead one. And he snapped a branch off and he had a little board a bit like this of hibiscus, carved it out with his sharp claws. He looked around and he saw a banksia tree. Ah, Banksia, my friend. He knew the big old bad Banksia man. He's actually not big bad, he's actually old and sings great songs. Many voices, just ask Lee True. And he spoke to the Banksia and he gave him a little furry Banksia. The trees, the plants, they didn't know what they were doing. But Bunyip did. And he got that and some dry leaves and he sat down with this there, put it in there, and he began to spin it and spin it and spin it. You can't really see it, can't really show you. Go like that, but your hands are like this, eh? Most of you know what this is. And like that, it started to smoke a little. And you could smell it. And then a little ember came through. A little red belly black snake came out. Ha ha! He took it, he put it in that Banksia, dry Banksia flower. Blew it till it became fire and tossed it into the dry leaves. Licked the wind. It was blowing from the west, hot, straight towards the ocean. This'll teach him, he thought. Oh, can you imagine? Horrible Bunyip. Horrible, maybe. But you know, they've all got a backstory. Can you imagine being that Bunyip? The only one there sitting in your billabong? In fact, all these other people had to leave. Yeah? It was a tough time for the Bunyips. And he knew it more than any. And so, he'd turn like this. Anyway, sure enough, that fire started to crackle and rise up and grow and start to spread, and he sat back at his billabong watching, thinking he'd done something very clever. The fire grew, the smoke began to billow, and down on the beach they were still arguing. They weren't paying any attention. Well, until all of a sudden they couldn't help but smell it. They looked and turned to the west, and there it was. Uh-oh, it was a forest fire, which was very unusual because, well, no one could light fires in these times unless you were a lightning god, and there hadn't been any lightning yet. In fact, it was very dry. What's going on, they said, and they watched the smoke started to fill the air. Oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? They started to scream, and then they thought, oh my goodness, Santa Claus won't be able to fly if there's all this smoke in the sky. There's no way we're going to get our presents if there's a fire burning. Oh, and they started to think about all the presents they wouldn't get. They were a mess. Probably partly their nervous systems were a bit tweaked from the fire and they were in a bit of a panic, but still. Up on the mountain where the sun spirit lives, well, he kind of lives in the sky, doesn't he? Up in the sky, where the sun spirit lives. They saw what was going on. My goodness, there's a fire down there. I didn't bring a fire. There wasn't. What's going on? And so, he flew down. He sled. What was it pulled by? Probably pulled by kangaroos, right? One with a red nose. Maybe. I actually think it's pulled by the wind spirits. And the sled is like a cloud, a beautiful silver cloud. And it travels like that, and he's a bright, shiny-faced being. He rode that silver cloud pulled by the wind spirits down, all the way down to the beach, and he landed in the middle of that circle. He said, ho, ho, holy smokes, what's going on here? And the animals turned on. They said, Santa, you're alive, and you're here, you've come early. Have you brought our gifts? And he gave him that book. And when you get that look, even if you're a bit dysregulated and panicking, you kind of know, oh yeah, right, no, something, oh. He said, where are your parents? They said, they're in the forest. And then they really realised what was going on. Oh dear, they started to panic. What are we going to do, son? There's a big fire and our parents are in there, preparing us for tomorrow. And he said, look, we all make mistakes. There's always space for repair. He said, firstly, let's go and rescue them. Jump in. So they jumped in the cloud sled, and they took off into the sky. And they started to search around. And they saw there in the top of a gum tree, clinging on tightly, was Grandma and Grandpa Koala. And they quickly down and grabbed them both, put them in before the tree caught on fire. And they saw down there in a river, there was, on a rock, there was Turtle and Goanna, Auntie and Uncle Turtle and Goanna, and they were sitting on a rock. They swooped down, quickly got them before the fire could boil them up. And they flew up and they saw up on the top of a grass hill, the fire's going up, and there was Mum and Dad Kangaroo. They swooped down and they picked them up. And like that, they went around and rescued all the family that they could until they were about to go back to the beach where it was safer. And they heard a big, scared scream. Ooh, that's a scary scream. Who's that come from? Thought, it's probably that old Bunyip. Just leave him there. Santa gave him a second look. This one was even worse than the first one. Probably Mum or Dad can do it better than me. So they said, okay, yeah, we'll rescue him. We'll rescue him too. And they flew down, and there he was in his billabong, and it was starting to bubble and the fire was coming in. Santa scooped him up, threw him in, and they flew down back to the beach. And they all got out. Some of them were burnt. They'd had their colours changed. They were exhausted and coughing. The little ones actually felt so happy that they could be in Mum and Dad's or Auntie and Uncle or Grandma and Grandpa's arms again. Santa looked around at them and said, now tell me, what on earth is going on with a fire without any thunderstorm? Something is out of place. And all the animals said, well, we don't know. We've just been getting ready for tomorrow. And the Bunyip kind of looked like this. He kind of wanted to look away. He did. Oh, Bunyip. Santa said, Bunyip, you got something to tell me? He said, oh, look, I'm sorry. You know I hate this time of year. It's not fair. Everyone's having fun down here by themselves. I never, ever get invited. It's not ever fair. Why doesn't anyone think about me? The other animals paused. They realised it wasn't all his fault. Santa said, well, now's your chance for redemption. Jump in. So they hopped back in that cloud and they began to fly back up into the sky, and the animals watched, hopeful for their beautiful home. Well, Santa flew him right up to the ridgeline where the mountains are. Probably where you live, you could look. Most of us could look west, and there'd be some sort of mountain range. That's where they went. Started to circle around there. Santa said, all right, Bunyip. It's been a long time, and I know you're the only one around here who can sing Up the Rain properly. Well, anyone who knows anything about Bunyips knows that they're a water spirit. They're deeply connected to the water. The movement and the flow of life depends on them. So you could imagine if someone got grumpy and dried up inside, the land would dry up too. Of course he hadn't been singing to the rain. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't have it in my heart. Santa looked at him and said, look, the land needs you. Those children need you. Come on, said fine. Now as they circled around, I don't know what language and what melody the song was sung, but a song began to get sung. And the more Santa swirled around, the stronger the song got. And the clouds began to swirl up over that ridge, and they began to bubble up and ball up. First they were white, but then they deepened to a grey, a darker grey, until finally, with a great spark of lightning and a great crack of thunder, they burst, and they began to rain down a great downpour, a beautiful, soothing, calming downpour that landed on the land. And at first it just took away the flames that were burning. But the more that it fell, it began to go down into the soils and down into the roots and touch all those hidden places that had been left dark and dry for too long. And it began to soothe the land, and even the creek began to flow, so that when they got back down to the beach, the river mouth was opening up again. The land was singing along with Bunyip by now. And all of the little animals were soaked and so happy. Santa dropped Bunyip off. He said, "You guys, he's having Christmas with you this year. Solstice. Festive celebration. Midsummers." That's a good one. Anyway, they said, "All right, he can come with us." They said, "Will you still bring us a gift tomorrow?" He gave him that look again. "We'll see." So that night they gathered around as the storm went out to the ocean. And by the time the sun was setting on the horizon, a rainbow came through and landed on the land and told them things had been restored. The land was happy. The sky was happy. The river was happy. The ocean was happy. And the animals and their families were happy. Even old Bunyip had something almost resembling a smile on his face as they sat around that night. And he lit a new fire. This one a fire of love. This one a fire of warmth that brought everyone together for the first time. And they sat around that fire and they shared their stories. Some of the stories were to help process or help the ones who got scared and caught in the fire, just to give their story out so they didn't hold inside them. And they began to soften too and relax. And little by little stories were shared, and they began to dance their stories a little bit. And they began to laugh, and they told funny stories. They told stories the whole year, all the things that had happened in that big sun cycle. Until little by little, they began to fall asleep around the fire, except for old Bunyip. He sat there tending the fire, making sure it was safe, making sure everyone was safe. And he waited till that first dawn was about to rise, and he heard the kookaburra, and he snuck off before anyone woke up. But as he was doing so, he gave old Santa a little high five, because he had snuck in that deep dark time of the early morning and put one little present next to the fire. And both of them went their ways, back to the rivers, back to the sky. Now when all of the kids in the families woke up, they looked around. They were still a bit hopeful that Santa might have brought all those things that they'd expected. But let's be real, guys. No forest, no anything. So they looked around and realised it wasn't going to happen until one of them said, "What's this?" in that little box. Held it up. It was like paper bark wrapped up parcel, wrapped up with this beautiful twine that someone would have spun. And they opened it up, and there on a paper bark was one word. It said gratitude. He said gratitude. What gratitude? What's gratitude? They said. They looked at their parents. And their parents looked around and they said, "We'll show you." And that day they went around and they found where the water holes were the springs were regenerated, and they drank from the springs, and they collected pig face from the beach, and they collected lots of different tucker from the bush, even some of those old bunyip pines. Yeah, the spirit connection of the old bunyip had finally dropped some of their bundles, and the pine nuts had roasted in the fire. They gathered them up, they all brought them back, and they brought everything together with a big feast. And they sat together and they said, "This is it. This is what it's about." And some of the children got it, some of them didn't. But they were happy they had their family. They were happy they had their food. They were happy the river was flowing. They were happy that they could play in the waters. So, whether they knew it or not, that word was in them. And it was a word that carried them all the way through to the next year. And you know what? That old bunyip never got forgotten it. That time of year again. He was always invited back. And he'd tell them he'd always come back too, because he always had some of the best stories to share. And he'd remember to sing. Make sure some of that rain came through, so no repeats of that last one. And so the cycle goes. And sometimes it gets forgotten, and sometimes it gets remembered. But I hope that in all of your hearts and your houses and your fires and your midsummer festivities, that special word is lived in your body and your life. Have a beautiful, nourishing, restorative, connected, land-inspired and land, earth, country supported Christmas, solstice, festive midsummer. Blessings, and look out for the Bunyip, because he might be out there and you might be able to hear a story from him one day. Take care.